in the Howard rail yard, coming into contact with two train cars on the Yellow Line, also known as a Skokie Swift, shortly after 10:30 this morning. We know from Chicago Fire that 19 people are hurt, 3 are in critical condition. An additional 15 other people were on that train and they refused treatment. So a crowded day on that train when this collision happened. No word yet on what caused it. We continue to ask the questions surrounding this case and work to get updates on the specific conditions of the people who were hurt in this. And you can stay with us on our stream, CBS News Chicago. That is where we will continue our coverage. We'll leave you on air for now and return to programming.
This has been breaking news from CBS 2.
We are back now live on the stream, CBS News Chicago, continuing our coverage of a CTA train collision happening this morning near the Howard station on the Yellow Line, where 19 people have been hurt. 3 of them are in critical condition. I'd like to bring in Chris Habermill again if I can. Chris, now that we have that round number of people hurt, we talked about what that force may have done to people. I can't imagine you're surprised that it is such a high number. We don't know how many people were on the train at the time necessarily, but with such a force, we had to know that those injuries were pretty impactful.
And unless you have advance notice that something is about to collide with, or you're about to collide with another object there, not only do you have the car up front that obviously suffered the devastating impact, but the car back behind that is completely, anybody back there would be blindsided by what happened. All of a sudden, boom, next thing you know, you're on the floor, you're over a seat back, you're into some sort of an interior feature of the car. Now, Joe Schwieterman has indicated that these were built to standards that would allow them to not be completely devastated, but it looks as though the impact damage there's a guard on the back of that piece of equipment there that actually got into the motorman's area,
right.
the actual cab there, folded it over, punched it in, actually went up and over the reinforced floor and the bumper area or floorboard area of the frame. So there's some mitigating circumstances here where you're not just hitting another flat front vehicle, you've got something that actually protrudes out the back that you can actually kind of submarine underneath a little bit there. It's very unusual to come in contact with a piece of track maintenance equipment like that. So
sure.
That being the case, you've got not only the rapid deceleration, but all the momentum. It's going to come out in the wash how fast that train was moving, but given that impact, it appears as though it was at a relatively good clip where it contacted the back of that other piece of equipment, and the sudden stop would have thrown everybody either over each other or onto the floor.
Right. Chris, when you're looking at responses like this, if we can, now that we know the numbers of 19 hurt and 3 critical, what sort of injuries you would expect the people would be dealing with because of that force?
Blunt force trauma. You could have even some broken bones in this, given the devastation to the front. Fortunately, it doesn't appear as though there had to be any kind of heavy hydraulic or spreader work done, which indicates that the motorman may have realized what was going on and evacuated that cab, stepped back at least a little bit so that they weren't trapped inside there, because that would very easily could have been a fatality, given anybody that would have been seated right there where that piece of track equipment actually violated, came in,
right.
That deep incursion into the head end of that car. But as far as a rapid deceleration goes, you are just basically inside a car that's loaded with other fixed objects, literally, that you could run into. Right. Not only the floor, the bars that you hold on to, any kind of the vertical supports, seat backs, or other passengers, too. Ramming from one person into another person, too, bone-on-bone contact, that's a very severe type of collision there.
Right.
And so orthopedic injuries to some degree, head injuries, you could have lacerations, bumps, bruises, ranging all the way up to spinal injuries.
Right, and presumably in our video where we've seen people either, taken away on stretchers or being bandaged up, we've saw both of those injuries happening from this. I want to let our viewers know you're seeing Chopper 2 making some movements, swinging around, bringing us this shot as we get a wider look at the rail yard there at the Howard stop. It is because the chopper needs to stay out of O'Hare airspace, so that's why it's giving us this roundabout look at the scene of the collision. I would like to bring in transportation expert Joe Schwieterman once again. Joe, thanks for your expertise. As we look at that point of impact, and I know you mentioned it looks like the train is in the southbound lanes, do we have any information as to whether or not there may, because of that direction, have been a motorman in that space where we are seeing the worst of the impact?
The motorman would be on the right side of the car,
okay.
And that's had some really heavy impact. And I do think, as your previous speaker said, that let's hope the motorman at the last moment moved out of that, because it looks like at the front door there's a small door or a center window that's had, looks like some heavy steel into the main part of the vehicle. So I agree that the real concern here is that this may have happened so quick that passengers may not even felt rapid deceleration enough to brace themselves, put their heads down and so forth. So you have just in a matter of seconds, this thing may have happened. Also, it strikes me looking at this is the apparent speed, because the train can have a pretty good collision, at 10, 15 miles per hour, say, and the structure of the car itself may not be affected all that much. But here, it appears the speed was higher than that. Of course, the vehicle it hit was a little bit worse case, too, because this is a piece of work equipment that has steel projecting out from the front of it. So it's not like hitting a bumper post at the station. You're hitting something that's got apparently sharp edges to it.
Sure.
And that just tore through the front of the vehicle.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to me, that leads to this, what looks like almost a shredded front section of that train car. Joe, you spoke earlier with me about how rare collisions like this are. If you can share again why that is, what improvements have been made to avoid collisions like this, and with that knowledge, what are some of the questions that you're asking of the CTA about how this could have happened?
No, that's exactly right, and we do see we have a real problem with rail safety in this country, but most of it pertains to vehicles not watching crossing tracks, derailments that occur. So collisions have been dramatically reduced. Not to say they're extremely rare, but at least in the CTA, we've had a pretty good run without anything quite like this. So it just raises all these questions, that it takes multiple things to happen for a collision to occur, like several miscues, technology failures. So we're curious just how this could happen, that this vehicle would be on an active track in the middle of the day, why the signal system didn't alert the motorman to stop, whether there's automatic stopping mechanisms in place. We'll have to find that out. But I will say that I just don't remember seeing anything quite like this on a rail rapid transit system. They're a little more common on freight railroads, where a freight train will hit a work crew that's on an adjacent track. But they're both on the same track here.
I would think that would lead us to believe that piece of equipment had a mission, was on its way to complete some work in order to be on that very busy set of tracks.
That's right. Often you can do that. It's a two-track railroad, so the CTA is invested in a system where you can do work and keep the other track in operation. And the Yellow Line is low enough frequency that can be done quite easily in the middle of the day, where trains aren't like in the rush hour every 7, 8, 9 minutes. They're much less frequent than that. So we may well have had a work crew. Now, we did have some problems on the Yellow Line a number of years ago, a decade or so ago, with the ballast. The embankment was weakened, and it put the Yellow Line out for many, many weeks because it just wasn't safe because of the risk of a slide that would cause the tracks to buckle. And so lot of work is constantly needed on that line just due to the nature of it sitting on a high embankment. Trains moving at pretty high speeds.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Again, for those of us not familiar with the communication systems, Joe, if you can you tell me who someone in that piece of equipment and the motorman would have been talking to, and or what information would have been in front of them that ideally would have let them know that something else was on their track?
Well, you have the trackside signals, which are quite common. You also have clear plans when maintenance occurs. There's a whole agenda set out to make sure that, you double check to make sure there's no conflicts that occur. So what we don't know yet, have to find out what kind of other technological safety systems are on that line with different train control devices that are automatic. But we do know these trains can stop quite quickly. So that's why, we have so many stops, say, on the red line. The trains can accelerate, hit up 35 mile per hour, almost by the time they leave the station, because with electric traction, acceleration is fast and they're light and they can stop quickly too.
Joe, this is a popular line for folks who are living in Skokie or in the Evanston area, the Yellow Line specifically. We also know that the Purple Line goes through Howard. Both have been suspended at this point. The Red Line also goes to Howard. So even though the Red Line is currently running, it's possible if you're going to Howard, you may either see some first responders there today and police and investigators, or just have some sort of a delay. This, as we look at video of some of the 19 people who were hurt in this collision. Joe, do you have any sense of how long this could take? We heard it from the CTA. They're working to clear the scene. We are looking at, it should take some time. Actually, Joe, before I hear from you, I want to let our viewers know we're looking at photos that were just tweeted out by the Chicago Fire Department, and you can see right there, boy, how deep that indentation goes. Not as deep as you would think necessarily in such a force of a crash, but that whole front cab. Wow. Joe, are you seeing these too?
I am, and it's, like I said, there's some sharp projectiles heading right in the center of that car.
And I think of a motorman who may have been in that area.
That's right, and we don't have any word yet on the condition of the motorman, if he escaped injury. But we do see people coming out on stretchers that suggest that there was some, and not only broken bones and bruises, but things more than that with the 3 people in critical condition.
Sure.
Your question about what's like with the CTA, I suspect the Red Line itself can operate evening rush hour fairly normally, because we just don't know yet. But the trains are designed to turn around at Howard. That's the basic schedule format. Purple Line trains are different, though, because they come through that area, they cross, and people connect with the Yellow Line for that. So Purple's trickier, but certainly the Yellow Line itself, that could be weeks before that's back in operation. Just don't know. Again, there's not a lot of track damage. The track itself looks okay, but we do have an investigation scene. It's going to be a very complex investigation, no doubt.
Right, and with that, that's why I brought that up. I mean, if you or a loved one are obviously at any point interested in the Yellow Line, I agree with you. I think it's very possible that this could be shut down for much longer than just today. We'll have to get an update on the Purple Line, but there is so much that would go into an investigation. Joe, honestly, in just the last maybe 20 minutes or so is when we have seen these investigators get as close as they are now to the front of that train car, which makes me think, again, this is certainly a big chunk of the day that we're going to have that track blocked off and suspended as they start this investigation.
Oh, that's right. And the purpose of these investigations just isn't to find out who's at fault, but how we can think about how we can prevent this from happening again. So every little bit of evidence is key. Did the cars live up to their crashworthiness specifications? Was there proper training by the motorman to look for those signals? Of course, the maintenance vehicles, that's going to have to be relooked at. And national officials are going to come, certainly, to facilitate that. And, we don't have fatalities here, but we have critical injuries. And that makes us quite different than, say, a routine derailment where we can identify the cause pretty quick. There's likely multiple factors here that contributed to that. And this being such a busy area for the CTA, it's like the choke
Right.
point, you might
It
say,
is,
for
yeah.
CTA Rail. And so much happens around there that those yard functions could be affected as they conduct the investigation.
You mentioned a national response. Joe, is this something that the NTSB would be involved in, want to know about, investigate themselves?
Yeah, we'll have to see, but it does seem likely because this is, more than a dozen people injured, and it's not. Things that wouldn't rise to that would be a highway rail accident where somebody crosses an active set of tracks and get hit. So that's not the kind of thing that typically triggers an investigation. This is different, though, and I think the fact that it's so murky as to what may have caused this. Now, sure, that we'll soon hear some basic details of this. But we're going to get back again how multiple things have to happen for an accident like this to occur. And let's just hope that these, if those in critical condition, do improve.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate that update. Stay with us, as I'm sure we'll ask you for your expertise again and some further questions. We're getting an update now that 23 people are injured, up from 19. 23 people, and it's believed still that 3 of those are in critical condition that have been hurt in this collision on the Yellow Line at 10:39 a.m., where the 2 train cars of the Skokie Swift collided in some fashion with that piece of equipment in the rail yard. If I can, I'd like to bring back in CBS 2's Chris Habermill, who's been giving us his input as a first responder as we look at these pictures of that crunched front of the CTA train car, the point of impact. Chris, I haven't talked to you since we've had these photos come in. What's your impression?
Just like Dr. Schwederman there, taking a look at the front end there, quite an incursion into the motorman's position there, and they sit on the right, so that's even deeper on that side. The floor level is intact. The bumper at the front there is intact. It looks as though maybe that there's a bunch of guys standing in front of that lead wheel, but I think it's kind of shifted out into the gauge there. Basically, it's between the gauge, in other words, where the flange meets the rail and it keeps it in line there. It looks as though it may have dropped inside to the tracks there, so a minor derailment that you can easily get with jacks and put it back up there. It's not as though it's going to need a crane or anything to get moved. But getting back to the national response, of course, the NTSB would be involved with something like this. You've got a public conveyance. You've got critical injuries. You've got almost 24 people that have been hurt by this. And obviously, we've had some significant failure of either positive train control, signaling, some sort of a miscommunication that placed both of those, not only the consist, the 2 cars, the passenger cars, but also the track maintenance equipment on the same track. So that being the case, these will be left in place until the on-site portion of the investigation is complete. Once that is done, then they will be released to be taken back to the shop in order to be preserved, again, as to have a further detailed investigation done, a closer examination of both of these pieces of equipment to make sure that everything that was on board, any kind of systems that would have been used for train control, for acceleration, for deceleration, for operation of each one of these units, make sure that there's some sort of consistency, make sure that they actually were functional. Electric trains, just like getting in an electric car. It's 1 for 1. You go ahead and what you put into it is what you get out of it. So you can accelerate very quickly. You can decelerate very quickly. Again, it comes down to examination of the sight lines, examination of the trackside signals, examination of what other kind of train control may have been on board these, how they are equipped. What the operators could see out of each individual piece of equipment.
And we know that is going to take a significant amount of time.
Bet. And so there'll be shuttle buses in place, no doubt, and we'll be hearing, I'm sure, more from the CTA on that respect.
We absolutely will, Chris. Thank you. If everyone could hang on with me just for a second, I want to pull up the CTA in its statement gave us some different bus routes that folks can take. I will try to call that up here in the next few minutes. But now I want to get to CBS 2's Sabrina Franza. She is along the line, I understand, where people are finding that they are unable to take the CTA, part of the ripple effect of this impact. Sabrina, what can you share with us about what you're seeing?
Hi, Marie. Yeah, we're standing right now at the Howard station where people are now trying to get on some of these buses. If you take a look behind me, it is a very busy station behind the buses that are lined up here. Obviously, the trains are not in service here, the yellow, the red, nor the purple, but we are encouraging people to come if they're near this Howard station and take the bus instead. The CTA recommending other bus routes like the 97 to Skokie, the 205 Chicago Gulf routes. All of those buses are conglomerating here as people cannot get onto the train. Now, what we have seen is multiple CTA personnel on scene here, trucks and trucks of them, making sure that people are able to navigate onto the bus that will get them where they are supposed to be. There are people that are lined up behind these buses trying to get on the various shuttles that will take them to their final destination. And in talking to them, a lot of them didn't know that this had happened at this train station, so tons of confusion as people are trying to make their way onto the bus, which is why you are seeing multiple trucks of CTA workers here on site, making sure that they're able to figure out which bus to get on. It seems much more controlled now than it was when we got here a little while ago. And like we said, people are just trying to find alternate routes to get to where they have to be. But the main advice that we could give is to just allocate some more time, if you're listening to this right now, to get where you have to go, because the trains are not operating and we do not know, Marie, when they will start back up again. But right now, that's the latest here. We're at the Howard station. Sabrina Franza, CBS 2 News. Marie.
Sabrina, thank you for that update and passing along those different routes. I want to echo what she said. If you are someone who is taking the Yellow Line or the Purple Line later today, or you know someone who is, again, Yellow Line riders are being told by the CTA to take that number 97 Skokie bus. And if you're a Purple Line rider, you can use the 205 Chicago Gulf bus. Certainly, if you show up on scene, they're going to be directed to the right place for you, hopefully by some CTA personnel on site. We're giving you another look at the closest shot we have seen yet this morning, now into afternoon, of the CTA Yellow Line train that collided with a piece of equipment this morning just after 10:30 in the Howard rail yard. We know that it's going to be quite some time before anything of that scene is touched. It's preserved. Photos are being taken right now. The investigation is well underway. And while the seriousness of this accident and the 23 people hurt, including the 3 in critical, is our priority here, it's also important to note for our wider audience that there will be impacts to CTA coverage and usage for quite some time. I would be very surprised if any of this is improved for commuters before the evening rush, so we do hope that you plan accordingly. You are seeing some of the people now that we captured on our cameras being loaded into ambulance, some of those 23 people injured. When we were overhead, shortly after this incident, when we pretty much first got to the scene, we saw those triage areas of people who were in critical, some who refused treatment and said they were okay, others who were sort of in that middle ground of needing medical response. And so that's a pretty decent-sized group of people that were on 2 cars. If you'll stay with me for just 1 second as I get some new information. Good afternoon, I'm Marie Saavedra. We are covering a collision with a CTA Yellow Line train and getting an update from first responders from Chicago Fire. Let's listen in.
Sir, CBS is just getting here. Do you mind running through the number of injuries one more time?
A latecomer to the party.
We were around the corner, sir.
It's a total of 38 patients total. 23 were transported and 15 refused.
Any critical?
They range from critical to from serious to fair. Maybe 2 or 3 that might have been critical, but they were not life-threatening.
We're having a little bit of audio trouble there, catching the end of a press conference with the Chicago Fire Department and some CTA staff. They confirmed that in total, 38 people were treated and checked in on after that train collision today between a Yellow Line train and a piece of equipment in the Howard rail yard. We know that 23 of them were hurt. You're seeing some of them in our video captured here. 3 people remain in critical condition. We have not heard from the CTA any information about what led to this crash shortly after 10:30 this morning. We continue to press for those answers, and you heard as to the injuries. They range from serious to fair outside of those 3 people who are in critical condition who were on that train during that collision. We know that the Yellow Line and the Purple Line have suspended service until further notice. There are buses that can help take commuters to where they're going later this afternoon as this investigation continues. We are following this breaking story on our stream, CBS News Chicago. It's on our website and our app. You can join us there for further coverage and stay with us throughout the day as we learn more information about this CTA train collision.